So it's, oh, man, starting off with the wrong script already. Who needs a script, right? We don't need a script. No, we'll start off good. Here we go. Is that how this show's going to be today? For weeks we've talked about what the ideal schedule might be, and I think this show is starting off the opposite of what we would want a show to start off. It's starting off like the ideal schedule for the New Orleans Saints, which wasn't very good. We've been talking about for weeks about how the Saints needed to have an easy start to the schedule and not what they got. What is this? The 12-5 Cowboys on the road in week 2? The Philadelphia Eagles in week 3, just a season removed from a Super Bowl appearance? The overwhelming favorites in the NFC South, the Atlanta Falcons, with their new coach and their new quarterback in week 4? And again on the road in prime time to play the 2-time defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Oh, and in week 7, a highly motivated Sean Payton's return to the Superdome, and all the crap we're going to have to hear about it for days in advance and, probably more. I'll probably start talking about that in preseason. You'll hear about it for 7 weeks. Yeah, that ain't good. But how ain't good is it? We asked Times-Picayune and the Advocate Sports columnist Rod Walker and whether the home team can find their way out of this, whether they need to multiple upsets victories early in the season. We'll make our way too early predictions. Do predictions even mean anything this time of year? We're going to make them anyway. Coming up next on the Dattitude podcast.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.
Where you at, New Orleans? And hello to my friends elsewhere, everywhere, out there who have already cut out the 2024 New Orleans Saints schedule and stuck it to their refrigerators with a smiley face magnet. You do that. A lot of you do. Not everybody does it. We get all these things in the mail now. You get it from your lawyers, from whatever, your realtors. You might be living in your house for 20 years. You're not thinking about selling for the next 20 years. You still get it. We stick them to How many do you stick to the refrigerator, by the way? Answer that question. If you get 3 schedules from different people, do you put all 3 on there, or do you just want the prettiest one? You put the ones with LSU and Tulane on there too. What do you do? Oh, Lord. This has not been the start. Man, I'm telling you. I had this show, we're going to talk about all these different things this morning, the schedule. We're going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. All laid plan. I'm telling you, this show has started already like the Saints schedule is going to start. Can they do better than I'm doing here? I have fumbled the football this morning on Dattitude, but it doesn't matter. You're still here because this is Dattitude, episode number 240, a special Thursday edition for May the 16th, 2024. I am your fumbling, bumbling, stumbling host, Jim Derry. Whether you're watching on one of our NOLA.com social media channels or listening to the podcast, as always, I thank you for being a part of the show and a part of the Dattitude family. Rod Walker coming on in just a little bit to talk about this schedule. He wrote a column yesterday as soon as it came out of his thoughts, but he's going to share them here because I think it's important that we do go through it. There is one interesting aspect that we're going to talk about as well coming up. I do think that if there is a positive about this NFL schedule release so far, it is that the Falcons and Bucs don't necessarily have the easiest start either. The Falcons, as notated last night on the NFL schedule release show, which has become a whole spectacle in itself as well, they have the easiest schedule in the NFL by winning percentage from last year. Now, the Saints and Falcons both had this last year, so this is going to be 2 years in a row. There is a big difference, though, between last year and this year. We talked about it on the show yesterday with Eric Asher inside New Orleans. about how, remember last year we were talking about who's the toughest quarterback that the Saints would have to face last year. And we were talking about maybe it was Trevor Lawrence. Maybe it was Kirk Cousins, who they get again. There's no question who the best quarterback is on this schedule this year. Some guy named Pat Mahomes. He's pretty good. And that's not just one. I mean, you can make jokes about Dak Prescott all you want, but 12-5 2 years in a row. I mean, Dak Prescott, if anything else, is a fantastic regular season quarterback. He's proven that. Dallas Cowboys on the road, not going to be easy at all. Jalen Hurts, what's he doing his third season as a starter? How's Kirk Cousins going to fare? All these things we're going to talk about this morning. And hey, you can be a part of the show as always. We encourage you to be a part of the show. How do you do that? If you're watching live, you can type in your comment, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or X, and we'll show it here on the screen. Gabe's going to screen them. We're going to go through them. We've had plenty of comments and questions as of late. We encourage you to do that here on the show. We want to talk to you. We want you to talk to us. Even if you don't, hey, look, if you have this pie in the sky theory that the Saints are going to be fantastic, look, great. Want to hear from you. If you think the Saints are going to go 0-17, want to hear from you too. Saw a lot of 4-13 predictions. I don't think it's going to be that bad. We will go through all that coming up. A reminder to subscribe to our very growing Dattitude YouTube page. If you have not subscribed yet, go over to the YouTube page. Find us on YouTube, Dattitude. It's the only place you can find Dattitude, by the way, is our own Dattitude YouTube page. You click the little bell to receive notifications when we go on the air live. Going to talk again. This show's all about the Saints today. But before we continue our journey through the Saints 2024 schedule, give me one quick moment to continue the story about my friends at Evangeline Securities. You know by now that they are a company that can help you decide if it's the right time to sell your small to mid-sized business and what that business might be worth. Not only are there so few companies in Louisiana that can help you figure out the question of the future of your life, but there are none like Evangeline Securities. If you have been pondering the question whether it has been something on your mind for months or years, managing directors Nick Braden and Ron Hemelt came back to their hometown, New Orleans, from New York to help locals find solutions. And they do this with a complimentary service that includes a detailed assessment of your business to figure out its worth. Then they will go through their findings with you. Think about that a little bit before we continue explaining how Evangeline Securities can be the answer to the rest of your life. In the meantime, while you're listening to Dattitude, of course, you can visit www.evangelinesecurities.com. Last night, listening to all the talk about the NFL schedule release and all the, quote, big storylines, did you notice that the Saints weren't a part of any of those, quote, unquote, big stories lines? Except there was, and I watched the NFL broadcast. I don't know what ESPN said, but there was a little blip about Sean Payton coming back to New Orleans. It seems like, to me, that the Saints were just thrown in there wherever they fit. 2 Monday night games, but both are on the road against big-time contenders. The aforementioned Thursday game only because they can hype up Peyton. They won't be talking about the Saints that week. I mean, they won't be talking about the current Saints. They might be showing clips of the glory days and show Drew Brees and Sean Payton doing his, rah-rah thing when they blocked the punt and the Super Bowl and all that stuff. They're not going to be talking about the Saints. A bunch of Sunday afternoon games. Almost all of them are at noon. There are, I think, 2 3 p.m. games against West Coast teams. That's where this team is right now. It's up to them to get back to relevance in the eyes of the casual NFL fan in the networks. Jeff Duncan, he said it best in a column last week. He wrote, the Saints are, quote, at least for now, back to being not for ready primetime players. Their brand, NFL schedule makers are telling us, simply ain't there no more. Ain't there no more. What about Rod Walker? What does he think? We don't need to read his column to find out, although I strongly encourage that you check out his column and all of his work at NOLA.com/sports/Saints. What does Rod Walker think? Well, let's find out. Rod Walker, welcome to the show. The Dattitude podcast is Thursday morning, brought to you by Evangeline Securities. I know, Rod, you just joined in the green room, but I've been bumbling fumbling stomach this morning. I don't know what it is. I woke up late. I overslept. First time I made it all year. It's May 16th. I made it throughout the entire year without oversleeping. I had to bring the kids to school. That's what it's been this morning.
I guess you knew you had me on the show today. He's like,
maybe that's it.
I'm not waking up for that.
I'm turning it over. I'm turning the ball over. Jerry's here. My friend JJ's here. JJ is not he's going to keep it positive today, brother. Keep it positive. I don't know if that's going to happen. Are we going to be able to keep it positive? I don't know. We'll find out soon enough. All right. Your initial thoughts going through this schedule last night. And I know you feel a lot like I do. We hadn't talked in a little bit, but I thought it was important before the schedule was released, and we've been saying it with all our guests here, that this Saints team, more than any other, at least of the recent past, I thought it was important for them to start out with an easier, there's no such thing as an easy schedule, but an easier schedule early in the season so they could get some cohesiveness, start figuring out Clint Kubiak's offense, find a way to gel, overcome whatever potential offensive line woes they might have. I thought all of those things were important, and instead they got just the opposite. I don't think you could have, with the opponents that they had, and you knew they were going to have to play and where they were going to have to play them, I don't think the NFL could have scripted a tougher schedule, other than obviously Carolina in the opener, than what they put together.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on the Saints Insiders podcast last week, and that was one of the first things I mentioned, was that I thought a fast start was really, really important for this season. So you look at the schedules, not only are the teams tough at the top, but then you get those cold weather games at the bottom, going to Green Bay at night. I mean, it's like a really tough schedule. And, if they can somehow get through that first stretch of the season, I mean, I think they'll be fine. But, if it gets really bad, I mean, I just want to see I'd be curious to see if Dennis Allen can, right the ship. Because if it gets off track, people are going to start to, I mean, you were in the Superdome
my
last
God.
year. I mean, you know how the Superdome got early last season. So, yeah, I mean, that could very well happen again if this thing doesn't get off to a good start. And those first 7 games, I mean, it's tough.
I've already planned, Rod. I think I'm just going to get all of last year's shows and maybe just rerun them, because I got to say that this very well, you just said it, this very well could be a repeat performance, except the fact that they don't have all those same quote unquote easy games. So 9-8 to me, if they play like they played last year with this schedule, they're staring 6-11 or 7-10 right in the face if they played like they played last year.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this team. I mean, I don't know. And I said this on the podcast too, but this team hasn't done anything this offseason that makes you say, oh, they're going to be better this year.
Right.
I mean, other than Clint Kubiak, I mean, if he's not the savior that people think he's going to be, then, I mean, what have they done to get better? And they haven't added any piece. I mean, Chase Young, I mean, he's dealing with the neck, he may come in and help with pass rush, maybe, but outside of that, they haven't added any pieces that you think is going to really get this team above what they were last year. And on top of that, you got all these offensive line issues that, I mean, the line was an issue last year and it's gotten worse now. Andres Pete's gone. Ramczak's dealing with an injury. James Hurst retired. So, yeah, I mean, there's some concerns, and I don't know what kind of a genius Clint Kubiak is, but if this offensive line isn't good, whatever he brings in is not going to work. So, I mean, that's just very important.
Well, we'll say this. Not everybody's down on this schedule. Jerry likes the schedule. Jerry has been Jerry has been a part of this show and the Saints Insider show, and he was back with us at Bayou Bets, and he is always positive. And I have been preaching positivity for the past month and a half, saying that you need to be, if you're a fan, you should be positive. My son was texting me, oh, it's not that bad and all that stuff. And I'm trying to go through this as positive as possible. I'm also trying to go through it with a dose of reality. And if you look, I don't judge everything based off of what Vegas thinks. And the over-under right now in Saints wins at most places is 7.5. So Vegas thinks the Saints are either going to be 7-10 or 8-9, which I think is very realistic. But if you just look at what they think about the beginning of the schedule, they're and thanks to Gabe Henderson for getting these lines for me. But all the lines are out for the entire season. They're all out. If you just go by what Vegas thinks, they are underdogs after that Carolina game where they are 4.5 point favorites. They're a 6-point underdog at Dallas. They're a 3-point underdog at home against Philadelphia right now. They're 4.5-point underdog at Atlanta, which is unusual. The Saints aren't usually underdogs to Atlanta, no matter where they play them. And at Kansas City, they're an 8-point dog. So if you just go by Vegas, if there are no upsets, and of course it doesn't go by exactly what Vegas thinks, and they could win one of these games easily. I'm not saying they definitely will lose all these games, but if you go by these numbers, then the Saints are staring potentially a 1-4 start. And I don't know if a 1-4 start is something they could overcome.
Yeah, Jim. And I didn't see the Vegas numbers when I was writing my story yesterday, obviously, but that's what I had them. I have them starting at 1-4. I have them beating Carolina, and I have them losing their next 4 games. And if they can somehow still, I'm not gonna even give them a shot against Kansas City at night. But if they can somehow still, that second, third, or fourth game, if they're 2-3, I think they're probably doing good. But
yeah, I think 2-3.
I don't see it. Yeah,
2-3 is probably best case scenario, because here's the problem with what I have. And the reason why, and I was asked this multiple times yesterday, and I have the same answer that I've had on this show. I just don't think that this particular team is capable of coming back from a really tough start because of what they need to do to build that. It's not like last year they weren't very good and they were 9-8. This is a different schedule again, but I just don't think they have the capability of jumping out the gate slow. So saying that, you have a must-win game in week 1. I know coaches cringe when anyone says must win in September, but there's no question that Carolina game is a must-win. And then you have to find a way to win at least one against Dallas, Philadelphia, or Atlanta, because you're not going to beat Kansas City on the road on Monday Night Football. And then even if you do that, I think you have to find a way to beat Tampa Bay. So to start 3-3, I think, to me, for the Saints to have any chance to be a winning team this year and have a chance to win this division, they have to have a winning record, 9-8, maybe 10-7. And to do that, they have to start at least 3-3. So that's your scenario. Beat Carolina, win one of the next 3, and then beat Tampa Bay. And I think all that must happen for this team to be successful.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sure we were going to go through all of my picks, but I did the predictions for each game.
Feel free to talk about it.
No, after the Kansas City game, I did have a run. When I originally did my picks, I got to look at it on the screen here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had them starting 1-3, but then I had a run of them winning 6 games in a row. And I said, this team's not going to win 6 games in a row. So I had to go in there and find a loss. And I think my loss ended up being the Chargers because it's on the road. But I just don't see them, running off that many consecutive wins. So
I don't see.
But
that
even
either.
when I finished my picks, I ended up with them 9-8, which I think is a little too high. And I struggled trying to find 2 more losses. I really wanted to find 1 more loss. I didn't see another game that I said, that's definitely a loss. So I just kept them at 9 and 8. But I do think that's probably a little high. If the line is fixed, I think they can get to 10 wins if the line ends up being good. I just don't see anything that makes me think the offensive line is going to be good. So
Gabe Henderson has them starting 1-5 and 2-7. I don't. That's a little rough, but there are positives out there.
It could be.
Yeah, there are positives. Look, Chris Kennedy says, "Let this be realistic. Undefeated year."
That's not going to happen. They haven't been 3-0 since the Super Bowl year. So if they get 3-0, tell Gabe to come back and holler at me, and we'll consider it. Because if they go on the road and beat Dallas and beat Philly at home, Philly with Saquon Barkley on the team now, I like their.
Chris Kennedy, if the Saints, I will make a promise to you right now. If the Saints go undefeated, the day after that final game against Tampa Bay, you will be the guest on this show. You will be in fact, I may let you even give my monologue. You will be on this show. Rocky says front 7 games are rough and need to be 3-3 heading in the Denver game.
Yes.
Obviously, I agree. Before I get to the rest of this schedule, I'm going to leave this up on the screen. People can look at it while we're talking about this. But if there is any positive, and I kind of mentioned this in the open, But if there is any positive to the NFL schedule release, you look at some of the other teams, and I didn't even look at this until this morning. So I was wondering how the other teams, at least the contenders, I don't care about Carolina. They're not realistically going to be Carolina's not going to realistically be a contender this division. I'll eat my words if they are. But you look at Atlanta's opening schedule, and I didn't have time to make a slide for this, but their schedule isn't exactly great out the gate either, and they've got a new piece, including obviously a new coach and a new quarterback. They open up at home. They do have 4 of their first 5 games are at home, which is very odd. But they open up at home against Pittsburgh, no easy feat. They're at Philadelphia in week 2 on a Monday night. They host Kansas City on a Sunday night. Then they play the Saints and Bucks. So, I mean, their schedule isn't exactly all that easy. And then you look at the Bucks schedule. They play 3 out of their first 4 at home, but then go on the road for 2 in a row. But they open up after they open up with Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. They got to go to Detroit. They host Denver. Okay, Denver's not that great. But then they host Philly, and then they have 2 division games at Atlanta, at New Orleans, before hosting Lamar Jackson. And the Baltimore Ravens. And then they play Kansas City 2 weeks later on the road as well on a Monday night. So if there's any positive, their schedules aren't that easy to start either.
Right. And the Bucs got the first place schedule, obviously. So they get, you mentioned Baltimore, they get San Francisco, and they get, you said Detroit already. So, the schedule.
They play San Francisco right after they play Kansas City.
Yeah. The schedule's tough for everybody. I think if you look at the offseason, though, I think what Atlanta did in getting, Kirk Cousins, I think they probably made the biggest, because the quarterback was their weak spot last year. They needed to find the quarterback. So I think they probably made the best upgrade to their roster in the offseason. So, I haven't looked at the Vegas odds, but I think the Falcons are probably the favorite in the division. So
easily. They're like minus 130.
Yeah. I think the Saints would have been better off if they had got that Falcons game, week 4 game at home, but it didn't work out that way. So, and they've done well in Atlanta. I can't remember. I had the stat in my column today. I think they won 4 out of 5 or something over there. So, they have done well over there, but, I just think Atlanta probably made a better, improvement to their roster, more improvements to their roster offseason.
Here, if the Saints, again, and we're talking about best case scenario, I think the realistic best case scenario is that they start 3-3 going into the Denver game. According to Vegas, they are 3.5-point favorites at home against Denver on a Thursday night. Sean Payton, and I don't want to call it revenge necessarily. And Gabe points out that they have also won 7 of the last 10 in Tampa. Will it matter by week 18? Who knows? But then they go on the road to a new Chargers team with a new coach where they are currently 3-point favorites. But here's what I find interesting about what Vegas thinks about the Saints. They go to Carolina in week 9, and you say, okay, that's a cinch win. People are marking that off as a win. They're only 1-point favorites at Carolina in week 9. That just tells me almost all I need to know about what Vegas thinks about this team.
Yeah, that's a little surprising because, again, when I went through the schedule, Carolina with 2 wins that, maybe Bryce Young comes along this year and shows a big step. But those are 2 games I felt, pretty comfortable putting a W by. I don't think they're going to be blowouts because the Saints don't. It's a division game. You're probably not going to blow them out. But I did feel pretty comfortable with those 2 games. And let me go back a little bit to that stretch between week 5 and week 7 where you got 3 games in 10 days.
Right.
It's going to be tough.
It is.
Obviously, Kansas City is going to be tough anyway. But then you get Tampa Bay on a 6-day rest, and then you got to turn around. You get Sean Payton on a 4-day, rest. So he'll have his team ready, but, they have to make the long trip from Denver. So you'd like to think that the Saints will take care of business at home. But, yeah, that's going to be a tough stretch too, that 3 games in 10 days.
Thomas Devlin just have to play the games out because the division, I think, could end up down to the last game of the season like last year to determine who wins the division. No question.
Yeah,
absolutely it could. I don't disagree with that whatsoever. My only point here is that this, it's a rough start. When you got 9 games at home and you're playing 5 of your first 9 on the road, and 4 of them are against teams that many quote-unquote experts think could be in the playoffs, including the Chargers. I think the Chargers are going to be much better. I think Vegas thinks they're going to be much better. If you look at the numbers, So then the Saints here, and let's go back to being positive for a minute. If the Saints can navigate and do what we think is the best case scenario, go 3-3. Let's say they find a way to win 2 of the next 3 after that. It's possibility. Again, you expect to beat Denver at home. Again, I know Sean Payton knows Dennis Allen's defense as well as anyone, and he's going to be obviously super motivated. But Denver's over-under win total, I think, is it's either 4.5 or 5.5. I can't remember, but it's not very good. So Vegas doesn't expect them to be very good either.
So we're 5-4 now, right?
All right. So the best case scenario, you're 5-4 going into week 10. Then you have an entire month where you don't have to leave the city of New Orleans. And to me, if the Saints can get to 5-4, if we're going to be positive and look at the bright side and say what could happen for this team, this to me is where you need to make a run. And again, 2 of those teams all 3 of those teams are tough. Atlanta, Cleveland, the Rams, but you get your bye week sandwiched in there. I like the bye week. I wish it was a week or 2 earlier maybe. But the fact that you get to spend almost the entire month of November in the city of New Orleans without having to leave, and I think is a big advantage.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I like your 5-4 scenario, and then you at that point you're trying to get. I still don't think you're winning all 3 of those games. I think the Rams are going to be.
No, but you can win 2 out of 3.
Yeah, that takes you 7-5. So
7-5 and 7-5. If this team is 7-5 going into that Giants game, then I have a completely different outlook. I'm not saying they're going to do that.
Yeah, you get 7-5, then you look at the next 2 games, and I mean you think that takes you to 9-5.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And Green Bay in December.
Look, I mean that can get you. Yeah.
JJ says the Saints haven't been as good at home the past few years, but I think you're missing the point. The point is not that necessarily they played great at home, but I don't know that they've had a stretch, and I have to go back and look, where they've had an entire month basically at home, and that's what this is.
Yeah, and he's right, though. I mean, they have that home field advantage that they used to have hadn't really been there the past maybe 4 years. Maybe it just seems like the crowds get into the game at first, and then it's
sometimes the opponent's crowd.
Yeah. So, yeah, he definitely has a point there.
The Dattitude podcast, a special Thursday morning edition presented by Evangeline Securities here with Rod Walker, Times-Picayune, the Advocate columnist, also for NOLA.com, is as close to this team as anyone. And, look, what we say, what we predict doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, right? I mean, but that's what we get paid to do. We get paid to talk about this team and what we think. And look, I would rather be positive than negative, but it's just, you look at this and we're talking about best case scenarios, and best case scenarios are 5-4 start, best case scenario 3-3 start, best case scenario 7-5 going into the Giants game, and 9-5 they can do that. I mean, the fact is, going back to what this team is right now, Rod, to me, if they don't shore up this offensive line, and let's be realistic, I'm not being positive nor negative here, I'm just being realistic. They don't find someone who can play left tackle, I don't know that any of this matters.
Right. That's kind of what I was saying earlier. I mean, we've talked about Clint Kubiak and he's going to fix his offense. They're going to do all these things, but if you can't protect Derek Carr and you can't run the ball, which were both issues last season, then none of that stuff matters. I mean, they're just not going to be better. I mean, you keep up football, you know how important the offensive line is, and this is all assuming that the defense is going to be, as solid as they've been. And I mean, they made some moves on that side, but they still have some issues on that side. The pass rush wasn't great last year, so there's some issues that this team has to get through in order for any of this to even matter. So we'll see how that plays out. That's why I'm looking forward to training camp, just to see. And that's really not a good gauge, but I mean, at least you get to kind of see some guys. But I think this team still has some holes on this roster, and if they don't get those holes filled, do you see the potential? And look, there's still a lot to be moves. Again, it's May 16th. The complete roster of where the Saints are going to go into training camp is a long way from being done. We don't know what's going to happen with Marshawn Lattimore, and there are other Saints that could have issues, but I just don't think this team has finished signing free agents. And I get that they signed a backup guard the other day. Great, played for the Bears last year, whatever. But I think that there's still
a potential, and maybe not potential. I think there's a strong possibility that the Saints can still go out in free agent waters and sign a left tackle that could come in and at least start for a season, a la David Bakhtiari or someone along those lines that could come in. And if that happens, I might feel a little bit differently about where this team is going in the training camp.
Yeah, that definitely changed the outlook. You know, this team has done that in the past. They signed Tyrann Mathieu and even Jarvis Landry. You know, they signed them in the late wave of free agency right before training camp 2 years ago. I mean, obviously Jarvis is no longer here, but so there's some precedent of them signing some guys in that late period, and I think that this team knows what it needs, and I think they got to be aware of the offensive line issues. And I mean, we've seen some of these guys they've signed this offseason that more like depth pieces out as, I would call them depth pieces. I don't think these are guys that you're going to plug in and start. But so, yeah, I think that we are going to see some more moves, I think.
All right, a couple more schedule questions before I get to our final, well, not final. There's no such thing as final in May, but our way too early predictions at this point of the year, and we'll give our final numbers and what we think. I do want to ask you what you think are what are the games that you're looking forward to on this schedule? Obviously, other than the early games we talked about, and we don't know what's going to happen, but what are one or two games, and let's leave Sean Payton out of it because we're all looking forward to that. There's going to be so much hype over that. It's going to be insane. But what maybe one or two games are you looking at that are the most intriguing to you?
Most intriguing. I think you don't want to. You want me to stay away from the first 4 games, or you want me
you can do whatever you want. I'd say whatever you want. Just okay. leave Denver out of it, other than Denver, because we know that's intriguing.
Man, that's tough. I think it's a lot of them. I think the Dallas game will be a good gauge of if this team is
100%.
It's a good, yeah. I mean, I think that's a game and it's still early, so I mean they won't have all the kinks worked out, but I do think we'll know if the Saints are.
Yeah,
I don't legitimate or not.
I don't think the Saints necessarily need to win that game. Again,
right.
As of right now, they're 6-point underdogs. But if they go into Dallas, let's assume they beat Carolina. I mean, you can't assume anything, but let's say they beat Carolina for argument's sake or narrative's sake. If they go into Dallas and lay an egg, okay, then that's going to tell me a lot, right? But if they go into Dallas and compete and have a chance to win in the fourth quarter,
right,
then I think that maybe you might feel differently early. I think it's super important.
Yeah, if they do that, I think they come back and play Philly next week. I think you say, okay, maybe they can beat Philadelphia if they.
Philly has their own issues.
Right. So I mean, I think the Dallas game is going to be, and obviously early in the season, so it's pretty obvious. But I mean, I think that's going to be a really good gauge of where this team, just where this team is. I think you go to that Atlanta game.
How about Jaden Daniels? You think Jaden Daniels is gonna be super effective in his first year?
I think he'll be good. I think he'll be okay.
You're being nice. You're being politically correct.
Right. When I was doing the schedule, I mean, that was a game I said Saints aren't losing to Washington. If they lose to Washington, I mean, if they lose to Washington, that means they've shown us some stuff before that we knew they were going to probably lose to Washington anyway. So I don't.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't see them losing to Washington.
I do think it's intriguing though. Gabe's saying he thinks Washington wins that game. That's definitely one I would have the Saints with a W. They have to beat Washington. They've been good against Washington in the recent past. Again, that doesn't equate to today. But I will say
both Atlanta games are really interesting to me just because that's just a team. I mean, I talked about them earlier, but I just think that they've gotten better, and I just think if the Saints want to win division, I think the road goes through Atlanta, and you got to beat them at least once. You don't need to get swept by them because, I mean, if
that's going to lead. Yeah, that's going to lead into my last question before we get to our predictions. But I will say this, last year, and I brought this up a couple of times this week, but last year we were talking about who's the best quarterback on this Saints schedule. Was it Trevor Lawrence? Was it Kirk Cousins? I mean, we didn't even you couldn't really come up with it. And now you go through a stretch. If you look at weeks 2 through 5, and I just, we keep talking about the same games, but I mean, think about it. Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, Kirk Cousins, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, I think you're running the gauntlet there. That's to me. Thank God if you're a Saints fan, you got a good defense, but they're going to have to be really good. And maybe when you were thinking about drafting Kool-Aid, even if Marshawn Lattimore stays, you're going to need every bit of Kool-Aid and everything else you got in your defensive backfield for those 4 games.
Yeah, man. You don't have Tommy DeVito and
no.
Is that his name?
No Tommy DeVito.
Yeah, he's not on this schedule. And who else did they play? That we had Josh Dobbs, who actually played well in that
That's
game.
right. They had Bajent.
Yeah, like there was some low names on that roster last year.
There really were. And you think about that. You think about those names and those quarterbacks the Saints played, and they still went 9-8. So look, trying to be positive. Trying to be positive.
And there's not a quarterback on this list. Maybe was it Daniel Jones for the Giants? Maybe
Daniel Jones. In
Vegas, Gardner Minshew.
Will Matthew Stafford make it to week 13? Who knows?
That's a good question. You get Gardner Minshew with the Raiders, maybe if he's starting, and they've done well against him. But
Bryce Young twice. So I mean, it's not all tough, but man, it ain't all easy either. All right, last question before we get to predictions. One thing I did find interesting about this schedule, and I actually think it benefits the Saints in a way, because we talk about getting gauges and where the Saints need to be. But if you look, the first 10 weeks, the Saints play 5 division games. And so they can command – look, even if you do crappy in some of these other games, at least if you can go 4-1 in your division games, and I know that you might have to. But if you go 4-1 in your division games, the worst you could possibly be after week 10 is 4-6. Okay, even if you don't beat a single team, and I think they'll beat Denver. We'll see. But even if you don't win a single game outside of your division in those first 10 weeks, if you can go 4-1, you're 4-6, and at least you're in the conversation. Because if you're 4-1 in those games, those other teams, they're probably in the same 5-5/4-6 boat.
Okay. That's what I was about to say, because I mean, you already talked about how tough. I mean, everybody has a tough schedule in the division, pretty much. So, if they can, and you go 4-1 again, that means you beat Atlanta twice. Which, to me, if you've done that, then you probably are the best team in the division. So, if you go on the road and beat Atlanta, beat them at home, you beat Tampa, you're in good shape. Then, I mean, when I say good shape, I mean you're in good shape as far as making the playoffs in a bad division, which has kind of been the case for the.
I don't think it's going to be that much better this year. At first I thought it was going to be, but I don't necessarily think that now. I just don't. All right. Time for our way too early predictions and what we think is going to happen this year. And again, I may change my mind. And I'm going to throw this out with a caveat. When we give our predictions here, and I think you probably feel the same way. If the Saints do go sign a veteran left tackle, I'm going to feel different about this team. If the Saints do shore up, if they get one more wide receiver or another running back or some offensive threat, I may feel differently about this team. But we're going off of what the Saints have right now. If the Saints go into training camp with this current roster and don't make any more significant additions, what is your prediction on how they will do in 2024?
Well, since I went, I did my game-by-game predictions in the paper, and I did put the caveat at the beginning of it. I said this could swing 2 games up or two games down, depending on the line, depending on how good Kubiak is. But going through the schedule, I had them finishing 9-8, which I do think, again, when I look back, before I did the schedule, I probably saw this as more of an 8-9 team.
Yeah.
But again, when I went game by game, I mean, 9-8 is how it worked out. So again, I would have had to find another loss. Maybe I could have given them a loss to. I think Cleveland.
We don't have to find loss. I mean, I get what you're saying, but
I mean, Cleveland was the one I thought about. Maybe they will lose that one at home, because Cleveland was they were a playoff team last year. And again, I don't know the last time Atlanta swept the Saints. I think I may have had it in my column today, but.
It doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't happen, right?
Not in the recent past. It doesn't. It hasn't happened very often.
If that happens, I mean, you think
if they get swept by Atlanta, you can put an X on the season. Yeah. If they don't go at least 9-8, Rod, what are we talking about in January? Do we think it's? I mean, we know that this team is loyal to a fault. If this team doesn't go at least 9-8, do you think that Dennis Allen is out of here? We're not wishing for it, and I'm not like a lot of these. Go ahead.
Are you saying 9-8 and make the playoffs, or 9-8 and don't make the playoffs?
I think 9-8 right now, the way the NFL is. If the Saints go 9-8, I think it's 50-50 on whether they make the playoffs. So let's say for. Well, I mean, if they don't go 9-8, obviously they're not going to make the playoffs. I mean, very slim chance. But let's say they go 9-8 and don't make the playoffs. 9-8 and don't make the playoffs. Is not making the playoffs acceptable to this franchise?
It shouldn't be.
I agree.
It shouldn't be for. I mean, you look at what Dennis Allen. He got a chance to revamp his defensive staff last year. He brought all his guys in. He brought in his quarterback and Derek Carr. Now he's brought in his coordinator in Clint Kubiak. So, I mean, what else? I mean, I don't know how you say that to the fans, like, hey, we're going to run this back. And
I don't either.
You know, I don't see how you do it. So,
I don't either.
You know, maybe if they go 9-8, and especially if they get off to a bad start, I mean, the Saints aren't going to make a move in the middle of the season.
No, they will not. They'd have to be they'd have to be 0 for like in the middle of October.
So there is a scenario, I think, where this team goes 1-3 to start. No, 1-4 to start.
1-4.
And then you come back, and let's say you go, help me with my math, Jim, 8 and what the rest of the way?
8 and 9. Oh, they would have to go 1-4. They would have to go 8 and 5 the rest of the way. Right? No, 8 and 3.
8 and 3. Yeah,
no,
yeah.
8
So, 8 and 4.
No, 8 and 4. 8 and 4. 8 and 4. Shaw math, baby. You're putting me on the spot with my Shaw math right this morning. I already told you I fumbled through the open.
You always get worried when the Saints, start out slow and they do just enough to give fans hope, but I just don't think that works this time. I think, I
agree.
Year 3, I think, either this is a playoff team or they're not. I mean, and fans aren't going to keep buying into something that's not working.
And I do think that is the biggest difference. The biggest difference is that, Mickey probably sat down with DA and said, what do we need to do? And they talked about the things that they needed to do. Here's a big problem as well if they start 1-4. I think those locker room issues, and look, they can show that they're united all they want and say everybody's on board, and they got Tyrann Mathieu is selling the team and selling his love, and he's always been an ambassador. I love Tyrann Mathieu, and you and I have known him since he was in high school. And I love what he's doing. But look, you can only sell this team so much and talk about how this team is together. I just think there are going to be problems inside this locker room if they start out 1-4. And that's why I think this could snowball if that happens.
Yeah, it could definitely snowball. And to me, the worst case scenario, well, worst case, I was 0-5, but worst case scenario to me is you go 1-4 and you get embarrassed in one of those games, especially if you get embarrassed on the Monday night. And I know Kansas City is good, but you can't go up there and get embarrassed. You can't get embarrassed in Atlanta.
Oh no,
you don't want to. Yeah, none of those games. I mean, you can't. You can't get embarrassed. Period.
Look what happened to Atlanta getting embarrassed by the Saints. What happened to their coach? Right. Within 8 hours, he was fired. So I just don't. I don't think that DA can go through. I think it's different, and I know that a lot of people out there are skeptical. First of all, you're 100% right about Saints aren't, unless it's a complete disaster and train wreck. The Saints are not. The Saints are not going to let go of a coach in the middle of the season. The last coach that was let go in the season, not including the 2 guys who stepped down in the middle of the season, Jim Mora was let go. I mean, it would quit on his own in 1996. And then Bum Phillips also quit on his own with 4 games left in 1985. But you got to go back to Hank Stram, back to 1977, and John Meekum was owning the team. This team does not fire coaches and they've had some bad teams, so they just don't do that.
Jim, what's your scenario if they get him? I mentioned getting embarrassed once, but what if you start 1-4 and you get embarrassed 4 games in a row? And when I say embarrassed, I mean,
they lose by 20 points or something.
Yeah, 50, yeah, 20, yeah.
Look, I don't. First of all, I don't think that's going to happen. I really believe. I'm going to give you my final number in a minute, but I think this team is too good to be a complete and utter disaster. Okay, even with their poor offensive line. And right now, you got to say this is a bottom 3 or 4 ranked offensive line. Let's be realistic. That's what they are right now. And that's not going to win you games. But beyond that, they have too much talent elsewhere, I think. And I really do like Clint Kubiak, and I think he's going to lay the groundwork. And even if DA is gone, I think that there's a good chance that Clint Kubiak would stay. Maybe even be the next head coach. Who knows? I think he would probably be considered. Even if that is the case, I think this team is too good to be that bad, Rod. So I don't think they're going to get embarrassed. I just don't. I don't think they're going to get embarrassed. I just don't. And I don't put it out of the question that they could beat a Philadelphia at home. You know, we had a comment earlier that I just kind of put up on the screen, and I didn't really talk about it. But you know, Thomas says, "What if Philadelphia doesn't get better as everyone expects?" 100%. I don't know if we know that Philadelphia's that much better. They got Saquon, but I don't.
They lost 7 out of 8 of the games last year. I mean, they very well may not be that good. So
I'm not completely sold on them. And look, Atlanta's going to go through growing pains. And if they get off to a slow start, I don't care if they're playing at home or not. I mean, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Kansas City. I mean, would it shock you if they go 0-3 there? No. It certainly wouldn't shock me if they go 1-2. So certainly a possibility. Michael's saying 3-4. They're not going to be 3-14. That's look.
For me, Jim, there's nothing off the table. Any record that's matters. I mean, they're not going to go 0-17, and
they're not going to go 17-0. They're not going to go. To me, they're not going to go. They're not going to win 13 games or more, and they're not going to lose 13 games or more. That's where I am with this. But I agree with you. 5-12 wouldn't shock me. 12-5 would surprise me. Wouldn't shock me. 11-6, I don't think you could be shocked. But I'm going to say this. I've been too high on them the past couple of years. I gave them way too much benefit of the doubt. I'm not doing it anymore. I said, and I'm going to stick to my word. I said last week and the week before that if they had an easier schedule in the beginning, the first half of the season, I was going to go and I was going to bet the over 7.5 because I thought that was too low. But if they had a tough schedule to start, Vegas knows something I don't. And you got to take your personal feelings out of it when you're talking about numbers. And if you take your personal feelings out of it and you're realistic, I think this is a 6 or 7 win team. That's my feeling. And I think that there are massive wholesale changes when this season is done. Does that include Derek Carr? I don't know. But I certainly think they're a 6 or 7 win team. I don't think there's any question. I think Mickey Loomis would be, and he might not even want to be a part of that, to be honest. I mean, he's in his 60s. He may want to retire. Maybe they make a change there as well. But I think there's zero question if they're a 6 or 7 win team, no matter what they do, even if they get hot at the end of the season. I don't think there's any scenario where Dennis Allen stays here if this is a 6 or 7 win team.
No, I agree. I mean, I think you got to have a winning record for sure.
Yep. And
probably need to make the playoffs. I think.
I don't disagree. Rod Walker will be looking to hear what you guys say. The Saints Insider Podcast. It's Mondays and Thursdays right now, correct? Is that what it is?
This week we did. It's typically Wednesday and Friday, but this week because of the schedule release, we did Tuesday and Thursday. So
you got a show this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm not going to be on it because I'm here with you, though, man.
Oh wow, man. I'm impressed. I'm even more appreciative now. Rod Walker. So the Saints Insider Podcast will be also on all these same social media channels, except Dattitude. They have their own YouTube page. The Saints Insiders. You want to check them out as well. Rod Walker of the Times-Picayune and the Advocate, and we've been colleagues and friends for quite a while now. We've been in a lot of the same prep foxholes over the years, way back a decade or so ago. And I appreciate you coming on this morning.
No problem, man.
Talk to you soon. Rod Walker. Again, we spent a lot of time together in Lake Charles. We spent a lot of time together throughout different press boxes around this city. Always appreciate when he comes on the show and we get a chance to talk because we don't get a whole lot of chances to talk. But look, going on about the schedule and what I think, I hope I'm wrong. I am going on the final bet show tonight on Fox 8. And I'm not exactly sure 100% what I'm going to say. I was unprepared yesterday when I saw the schedule to say run, and I said it in some text. Run to the window and bet the under. 7.5 wins. I don't know. Maybe that's a little too strong. Maybe I'm being too harsh. I don't know. Because I have been preaching be positive, but I'm trying to be realistic. When you say be positive, or some people are just negative all the time. Some people are positive all the time. That's why I love Jerry. Jerry kind of keeps me in check a little bit. He's the positive guy. JJ sends me messages and he's not positive. So I'm trying to be realistic and I'm trying to stay in the middle, and I'm trying to analyze this schedule and where this team is right now. And so I'm going to go over something I said a few minutes ago, and what I do think is positive about the first part of this schedule. And it is the fact that you have 4 out of the first 10 are division games. And I think that is positive. Is it 4 or is it 5? It's 5, excuse me. 5 out of the first 10 are division games. So if you go 4-1 over that stretch, I mean, yeah, it stinks. You don't want to lose all the other ones, and I don't think they're going to lose to Denver. Maybe they can pull out a win against the other one. So maybe I'll be wrong. But I've been fooled too many times and I've been, again, overly positive. I think 2 years ago, I predicted they would win 9 or 10. I can't remember. But I was way off. I had a lot of confidence in Dennis Allen, and I thought I understood why this team hired him, and it was a fait accompli. I mean, the day that Sean Payton left, the Saints were kind of backed into a hole. I don't think they were ready for it. And they maybe a little, I don't know what's the right word, abruptly, or didn't maybe go through the process as well as they should have. But I understood why. I wasn't giving them grief over it at the time. Dennis Allen is probably the right choice if you're trying to stay on the same course that you've been. But when you're talking about a Sean Payton, I mean, it doesn't matter who the coach is. There's only one Sean Payton. It's hard. You can't cling to the past in life or in sports. And so maybe I was guilty of it as well as the Saints, guilty of clinging to the past. So the one thing that they've done this year, and then last year I said I thought they would win 10 games, they won 9. I wasn't that far off. But there is no more clinging to the past. The fans aren't going to accept clinging to last year I said it didn't matter what the fans thought, and I 100% meant it. And they've proven this. It didn't matter in the past what the Saints thought. That is no longer the case. If you keep seeing, for the Philadelphia game, if you see a sea of green, the Denver game, if you see a sea of orange, if for the Rams game, Rams fans don't care enough. But if for the Washington game, and the Saints are just not very good going toward the end of the season, because what you're going to see is the same thing you saw when the Saints hosted Cincinnati year before last. What did you see? LSU fans, there are plenty of LSU fans who don't give a rat's ass about the Saints. Let's be realistic. What did you see in that Saints-Cincinnati game? You saw a lot of LSU fans coming to the game wearing Joe Burrow jerseys and rooting for the Bengals. You can see the same thing for the Washington game if the Saints aren't very good by then. This team, this coach cannot go through that again. He cannot survive it again. Because, it does matter this year what the fans think. Didn't last year, does now. So with that being said, I'm going to say 7-10, and I hope I'm wrong. Nobody wants to go through what fans have been going through, again, because of the start. Because I don't think they're going to go 4-1 in their division games. They have it in them. I just don't think they're going to do that. All right. We're going to talk next week. We'll talk a little LSU baseball. I don't know who my guests are. Usually by now I know who my guests are. I even have an inkling. I don't even have an inkling of who my guests are next week. Monday might be a Derry's Dime. I might start going back to that now. We are going to take a break at some point and take a little vacation. That's not for another month or so. I know Gabe's taking a vacation coming up soon, but we've got a whole month's worth talking, not just analyzing the schedule, but analyzing this roster. We're going to start going through, we talked about offensive line already on the show, and we've been kind of harping on that, but we're going to start looking at other positions too. I mean, are the Saints as good at linebacker as we think they are? I don't know. Are the Saints good enough at skill position players? I mean, we know Derek Carr is going to be the quarterback. Do they have enough running backs? Do they have enough wide receivers? I don't know. We're going to go through that. These are all topics we're going to have over the course of the next month. The Saints, their defensive backfield we know should be very good. We'll probably wait until post June 1 to see if Marshawn Lattimore's staying or not. That'll be a show. The defensive front, that's certainly going to be a show. We haven't hardly talked about the defensive front at all. That's coming up in the near future here on Dattitude. So plenty of things coming up on Dattitude that we've got to talk about before I go on vacation, because when I come back, it's going to almost be training camp. And then we're going to start talking about it won't just be Saints. I'm going to do a lot of my team preview stuff here. If you remember, if you've followed, if you know, I've been doing these long, extensive team previews. I'm going to cut those down a little bit. And I'm going to do my team previews on this show. By the time you do that, it's over. The season's starting. So, look, we've got a lot to talk about in a short period of time, and it seems like a long way away. But you older folk like me know as well as I do. It goes by really fast, even when it's not. I mean, football fast goes by like that. I mean, it's insane how fast it goes. But even the offseason goes by fast now. So, Saints. That's coming up. That's what we're going to talk a lot about. And we have a Saints extra point for you today. But before we get to that extra point, I want to continue the story of how Evangeline Securities can help you figure out the rest of your life, even if you are pondering selling your small to mid-sized business, or even if you know someone who is in this situation. Is that you? We told you earlier in the show, managing directors Nick Braden and Ron Hemelt are ready and waiting to put together a complimentary detailed assessment of what your business is worth. After they do this, and if you decide to proceed, they will begin an extensive auction process among established private equity funds from across the world. Then, you know what they're going to do? They're going to do their best Drew Brees imitation, because they're going to quarterback a transition for you by working with investors, lawyers, accountants, and financial planners. You see what I did there? The investors are kind of like the running backs and the receivers. The accountants, maybe they're the punter. I don't know. Financial planners, those guys are the frontline guys. Those are the big men, the defensive linemen and offensive linemen. I don't mean to be. I have so many accountant friends. They're probably cursing me out right now. I can't wait to get texts from my accountant friends. Evangeline Securities will maximize the return process for the founder of your company and the founder's family. They are the top producer on their platform. There are very few companies like Evangeline in this area, and none with their dedication and success for the people they so care about here in the New Orleans area and in South Louisiana. They are fully licensed and ready to serve you. So before you make your plans for the fall and these beloved New Orleans Saints, you have plenty of time to talk to Nick and Ron about what's really important, the rest of your life. Visit our friends at www.evangelinesecurities.com. Okay, let's end the show with today's extra point. And again, talking to my older folk friends, because a lot of you will remember this. We're going to go back to a time that was special for me in a multitude of ways. It was 3 days before I graduated high school, Archbishop Shaw High School, Salesian Lane, Marrero, Louisiana. I'm still proud. May 16th, 1985. The potential deal for New Orleanian businessman Tom Benson to buy the Saints from John Meekum and keep them in the Crescent City was very much in danger. Before Benson would agree to the $70 million purchase, Louisiana purchase, all in the same. No, it's not going that far back. Before Benson would agree to the $70 million purchase, Louisiana legislators would have to negotiate a long-term deal with the Superdome that would benefit Benson and the team. The State House seemed poised to reject the deal that would grant the Saints $2.47 million per year for the next 21 years of concessions. That sounds like literally peanuts. The peanuts, can you imagine that today? 39 years ago, $2.47 million. I don't know. What is that, like $20 million a year now? I don't know. Attorney for Benson told the media, quote, "The deal is dead." And it looked very much like the black and gold would soon become the Jacksonville Saints, or maybe even move to Oakland that had recently lost the Raiders to Los Angeles. And they were even talking about maybe moving to Phoenix, which was still 3 years away from snatching the Cardinals from St. Louis. Then the miracle worker stepped in. Governor Edwin Edwards rarely made appearances in front of the State House, but he knew his presence could be the difference between the NFL remaining in New Orleans or leaving likely forever. That's right. No more Saints. No more Super Bowls. Soon after Benson had stormed off the floor, Edwards told state representatives, quote, "I don't even like pro football, but I do like this state. I think it is important to Louisiana to keep this team." Quite possibly, no other words ever spoken were more important on the floor of that chamber. Immediately after, amendments to the original deal were made, and the state passed the measure 53-43 to send it to the Senate, where it easily passed days later. Benson said after the House finally gave its approval, quote, "It was do or die today. We have to get going with building a winning football team." Has he done that? Did he do that? I think so. There's Super Bowl rings that said he did that. We talked last week about the Hornets being moved in 2002 to New Orleans and asked, what would the sports landscape look like without the Pelicans here? Can you even fathom the Saints playing anywhere other than our beloved city? I certainly can't. I know my life would be incredibly different without them being in New Orleans. I might be a teacher today, God forbid, or an IT guy, or who knows what. And that's just one loudmouth West Banker. Imagine what it would have meant for thousands of others. And I'm not even talking about the fans. Yeah, think about it. Sure, the pigeons would probably be better fed on Sundays in the fall, and there would be far fewer football widow wives around the Big Easy. Those under the age of 45 or so wouldn't even remember life without the Saints here. Think about that for a minute. Had the Saints moved in 1985, if you're 45 years old or younger, you wouldn't even know the Saints. What would have happened to the Superdome? Where would Drew Brees have gone in January 2006? And would he have become a first ballot Hall of Famer to be? Would Sean Payton have become a Super Bowl winning coach? So many questions. Questions I am grateful that we don't have to answer. Life without the New Orleans Saints, even after 3 mediocre seasons and disappointed fans, is unimaginable. A bad Saints team is 1,000 times better than no Saints team at all. So whether you were a fan of the late Governor Edwin Edwards or not, or you aren't even old enough to remember him, let's give him a tip of the helmet this morning. Without him, and of course, the late, great Tom Benson, all of our lives would be so incredibly different and not for the better. Thank you, Edwin Edwards. Thank you, Tom Benson. And go Saints. That is going to wrap it up for us on this special Thursday morning. And for this crazy, busy week, we crammed what we usually do on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday into Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We hope you have enjoyed us this week, judging by the numbers. I am, personal note, seriously, I am so grateful for you guys out there, whether you're new to the show, whether you just found us by some happenstance and now are watching on a regular basis, or whether you've been with us all the way since episode 1 back in September of 2021. Whatever the answer is, I appreciate you and I thank you again. I say this all the time and I mean it wholeheartedly for being a part of the Dattitude family. I want to thank today's guest, Rod Walker, and of course, behind the scenes, Gabe Henderson, checking on all those lines, making sure I don't say anything too stupid. We hope you can join us next Monday when we start a new week and, of course, start looking ahead to future odds, mini camps, positional areas like we told you, maybe sprinkling in a little LSU baseball. What are the Tigers going to do this weekend against the Ole Miss Rebels? Do they have to win them all? They might. We'll talk about that. And a reminder, if you haven't already done so, to please subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page and click the little bell to receive notifications when we go on the air live. You can subscribe to the podcast, of course, also on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You can find a replay of the show also on NOLA.com/sports. Everyone have a wonderful, fantastic weekend. It's the last weekend before school ends. That's what I'm going to spend this weekend doing, trying to prepare myself. Enjoy it, everybody. We will see you on Monday. Take it easy, my friends.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.